Happy Mother's Day, by the way. I got you this cheap little trinket while Mom enjoys a week-long cruise, Emily said with a casual smile that didn't reach her eyes. Helen Parker's hand froze mid-air, holding the tiny plastic gift bag, the bright yellow ribbon mocking her anticipation. She looked across the polished dining room at the large gift-wrapped box labeled with her name in elegant script, already set aside on the buffet table. The contrast hit her like a cold wave. The room smelled faintly of fresh flowers and candle wax, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows glinting off the crystal glasses on the table. She took a measured breath, folding the small bag gently and placing it beside her plate as though it had no weight at all. Every family member's attention was elsewhere, chatting and laughing, clinking champagne flutes, exchanging pleasantries that rang hollow to her ears. Helen adjusted her silver hair, tucked a stray strand behind her ear, and forced a polite nod at the waiter passing by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. It was the type of smile one uses to keep dignity intact, to mask the ache of being subtly humiliated in front of those you've loved and cared for. The sight of the cruise brochure leaning next to the oversized gift from Emily's husband made her chest tighten, not in jealousy, but in the sharp sting of being undervalued and overlooked. The lavish destination, a week of pampering and relaxation, seemed to emphasize the distance between them, between the mother she had hoped to honor and the daughter-in-law who orchestrated this delicate snub. Helen's fingers traced the edge of the table, the smooth oak warm beneath her touch, grounding her in the reality that she would not respond outwardly, not now. She could feel the subtle shifts in posture, the slight glance from her son as he laughed at a comment Emily made, the small curl of his lips that suggested he noticed but didn't intervene. Helen's mind catalogued the moments, the forced politeness, the subtle hierarchy imposed at a family gathering meant to celebrate her role, her presence. The weight of 35 years of shared holidays, birthdays, and simple Sunday dinners pressed gently yet insistently on her back, reminding her of the quiet erosion of respect over time. Helen sipped from her water glass, the cool liquid easing the tension in her throat, and allowed her gaze to wander to the window, where the harbor reflected the morning sun in fragmented patterns. Each ripple of light mirrored the dissonance she felt inside, the calm surface hiding undercurrents she would not yet reveal. She noticed the placement of the cutlery, the careful positioning of the napkins, and how Emily had orchestrated each small detail to reinforce the hierarchy. Her subtle smile, the way she gestured as she handed a cocktail to another guest before acknowledging Helen, the choice of the trinket itself, inexpensive and seemingly thoughtless. Helen's thoughts were steady, precise, cataloging every detail with quiet observation. She didn't rush to speak, didn't rise in indignation, because she understood the power of measured silence, the weight of restraint. The faint sound of laughter floated from the other side of the room, a reminder of how easily the scene could have gone unnoticed, but she noted every syllable, every tone, every slight pause that marked attention or the lack thereof. Helen allowed a subtle shift of her chair, adjusting it so she faced more toward the window and less toward the center of the table, creating a small barrier that symbolized her detachment from the orchestrated display. She traced the rim of her plate with a fingertip, imagining the layers of intention behind Emily's choices, the calculated difference between gifts, the indirect comparison set up in plain sight for everyone to see. She did not frown, did not voice complaint. She simply observed, collected, catalogued. Each passing moment became a point in her mental ledger, a record of respect denied and dignity maintained. Helen's posture remained upright, her back straight, her hands folded momentarily in her lap, radiating composure. She drew the smallest breath, a silent acknowledgement to herself that this was a moment of power withheld, a chance to gauge the character and intentions of those around her. The chandelier above caught the sunlight just so, casting a pattern of light that danced across the room, highlighting the subtle contrast between the grand and the modest, between what was given and what was withheld. Helen's eyes drifted briefly to her son, his expression a mixture of awkwardness and polite amusement, a subtle signal that he understood the scene but would not intervene, leaving the weight of recognition to settle solely on her shoulders. The sound of a napkin dropping from another table punctuated the quiet tension, drawing a soft smile from Helen, a controlled, knowing smile, not of pleasure, but of awareness. Every glance, every gesture, every tiny orchestrated detail had been noted, stored, processed. Helen did not speak. She did not react outwardly. She simply allowed the moment to unfold as it had been designed to do, capturing in her mind the entire tableau, the imbalance, the subtle humiliation, and the silent assertion of self-restraint, the first quiet step in a longer, carefully measured response that would ensure her dignity remained intact while the intentions of others became fully apparent. Helen Parker sat quietly at the edge of the elegantly set dining table, the soft hum of conversation surrounding her like a distant echo, observing every subtle movement and word without interruption. The sunlight continued to pour through the large bay windows, warming the hardwood floor, highlighting the gentle sheen on the crystal wine glasses and the polished silverware, yet she remained detached, her focus internal, cataloging each moment with precise attention. Emily Parker moved gracefully around the table, her laughter light and practiced, engaging with other family members while Helen kept her eyes on the small trinket in front of her, a reminder of the understated yet deliberate imbalance of the morning. Helen adjusted the folded napkin on her lap, smoothing the crisp linen with measured fingers, her posture impeccable, radiating quiet dignity amidst the subtly charged atmosphere. She noted the placement of every plate and glass, the way sunlight caught the rim of a champagne flute as Emily passed, how the other guests leaned slightly toward her, sharing whispered comments that were almost imperceptible, yet they contributed to a tableau of social hierarchy that Helen analyzed silently. The soft murmur of voices from conversations at adjacent tables mixed with the faint clinking of cutlery created a rhythm she could almost follow, a cadence that allowed her to mark the timing of each glance, each subtle gesture. Helen traced the edge of her water glass with her index finger, feeling the coolness of the crystal and using it to anchor her thoughts, a small physical connection grounding her amidst the awareness of subtle slights. She observed Emily leaning slightly forward when speaking to her brother-in-law, the tilt of her head, the soft curl of her smile, all carefully measured to draw attention away from Helen without drawing immediate notice to the maneuver itself. Helen's gaze moved to her son, sitting beside Emily, his expression neutral but with a slight tension in his jaw, suggesting recognition of the dynamics at play but a conscious decision to remain silent. She catalogued each interaction, each microexpression, mentally recording patterns, evaluating intentions, and silently noting the imbalance between actions and expected courtesy. Helen shifted her attention to the floral centerpiece, appreciating the careful arrangement, the subtle fragrance of fresh roses mingling with the faint aroma of pastries and coffee, yet she interpreted the careful aesthetic as another layer in the construction of an environment designed to display hierarchy and intention. Her breathing remained even, each inhale and exhale controlled, steady, a quiet assertion of inner calm, a shield against the subtle sting of being undervalued and overlooked. Helen imagined the trajectory of the morning, the sequence of toasts, the distribution of attention, the allocation of praise and acknowledgement, noting how each was influenced by the positioning and behavior of Emily and the conscious or unconscious compliance of the rest of the family. She observed a young niece approach, carrying a small bouquet of daisies, the girl's bright eyes filled with excitement and innocence, oblivious to the underlying tension, a contrast that made the surrounding dynamics even more pronounced in Helen's awareness. Helen received the flowers with a nod and a soft smile, acknowledging the gesture without allowing it to disrupt her composed exterior, internalizing the sentiment without allowing it to shift the balance of power that had been subtly established. She watched as Emily effortlessly diverted attention back to herself, the laughter and conversation shifting like a current around her, and Helen remained an observer, silent yet fully engaged in processing the layers of social interaction. The gentle clink of dessert plates being set down drew her attention briefly, each movement deliberate, each placement part of a pattern she analyzed, noting the subtle choreography of the gathering. Helen allowed her gaze to wander to the harbor visible through the windows, the water reflecting the sunlight in gentle waves, and she drew a parallel between the calm surface and the careful control she maintained over her own reactions, the still exterior masking the careful observations and judgments forming beneath. She noted every shadow, every glint, every whispered exchange, cataloging them like entries in a mental ledger, understanding the motives and intentions without needing to confront or challenge them in the moment. Helen's hand rested lightly on the folded napkin again, her fingers tapping a quiet rhythm against the linen, a meditative gesture that reinforced her awareness of time and control, her silent presence a counterbalance to the orchestrated energy around her. She considered the timing of the meal, the sequence of dishes being served, the small yet deliberate emphasis on Emily's choices, and Helen's own deliberate inaction as a quiet statement of dignity. Each bite of food she observed others taking, each toast she witnessed being offered and received, was a study in patience and restraint, each moment an opportunity to reinforce her own composure while the intended social signals unfolded around her. Helen's eyes lingered briefly on a crystal decanter of water catching the sunlight, the ripples inside mimicking the gentle undulations of the conversations and gestures, a visual metaphor for the layered subtleties of the morning. She noted how Emily handled the silverware with practiced grace, how she positioned the chair, how she angled her body in relation to the other guests, all deliberate and controlled, and Helen internalized these patterns without outward reaction, a quiet acknowledgement of awareness and agency. Helen's attention returned to the small plastic gift bag, placed neatly beside her plate, a tangible symbol of the subtle inequities and orchestrated attention. Yet she allowed herself to feel no immediate frustration, no overt reaction, only a calm and calculated recognition of the social dynamics at play. Each movement, each glance, each smile around the table was carefully logged in Helen's observation, a quiet collection of data points she would use later, moments of calculated patience and quiet power, a framework for responding with composure and subtlety at a later, more strategic moment. Helen's awareness of her surroundings, of every reflection in the window, every light pattern on the polished surfaces, every minor sound, created a heightened sense of presence and attention, an inner equilibrium that allowed her to maintain dignity while silently understanding the orchestrated inequities. The soft clatter of a fork being set down, the delicate sound of laughter spilling from a nearby table, the muted hum of conversation, all became part of the texture Helen catalogued with precise focus, reinforcing her sense of observation and restraint, a quiet assertion of control over her own demeanor and understanding of the complex social interplay. At the table, she breathed steadily, tracing the rim of her glass one last time before setting it down with careful deliberation, maintaining an exterior of calm as the morning continued, fully aware of the subtleties and social cues, her inner resolve growing stronger as she absorbed the scene in quiet, measured observation. Helen Parker continued to observe the room with careful detachment, her eyes scanning each movement, each subtle gesture, every smile and nod, cataloging interactions as if mapping the currents of a quiet river. Emily Parker moved between family members, offering small compliments, adjusting napkins, pouring wine, ensuring her presence was noticed in measured, deliberate ways. Helen adjusted her chair slightly, aligning herself toward the window to watch the sunlight ripple across the water outside, the calm surface mirroring the poised control she maintained over her own demeanor. The gentle hum of conversation, the soft clinking of glassware, even the distant laughter of children played a role in the intricate social choreography that Helen observed. She noted the cadence of voices, the timing of laughs, the pauses and glances exchanged, all the while maintaining a steady composure, a mask of calm that belied the keen awareness beneath. Helen traced the edge of her water glass with her fingertip, the cool surface grounding her as she processed the layers of social nuance unfolding around her. She noticed how Emily subtly drew attention to herself, positioning her body and gestures to be the focus, and Helen catalogued these actions without a single outward sign of disapproval. The waiter placed a platter of delicate hors d'oeuvres in front of the family, and Helen observed how Emily subtly indicated which pieces to take first, reinforcing her role, without saying a word, a silent assertion of influence. Helen's gaze shifted to the small, inexpensive gift resting beside her plate, a tangible reminder of inequity and intentional oversight. She folded her hands gently on her lap, absorbing the dynamics of the room, each interaction meticulously noted in her mind. Helen noticed the positioning of family members, the way some leaned in toward Emily, offering her smiles and attention, while she remained the observer, silently registering every detail. The sunlight continued to filter through the tall windows, casting gentle shadows that moved across the floor and tablecloth, a visual rhythm that Helen used to mark the passing moments, keeping time with the unfolding social currents. She allowed herself a small breath, steadying her awareness, noting the subtle tension in her son's posture, the faint tightening of his jaw, as if he sensed the underlying design of the morning but chose not to intervene. Helen observed the gentle interactions of her younger relatives, the innocence of their gestures contrasting sharply with the deliberate sophistication of Emily's movements, further highlighting the disparity between attention and intention. Each sip of water, each adjustment of a chair, each careful smile and nod became part of a larger mental record, a precise understanding of behavior and motive, all catalogued in Helen's calm, deliberate mind. She let her gaze linger on the centerpieces, the polished silverware, the arrangement of the table, interpreting each placement as part of the subtle orchestration that reinforced the intended social hierarchy. Helen remained still yet fully alert, each sensory input feeding her awareness, the smell of fresh flowers mingling with the soft hum of conversation, the faint glint of sunlight on crystal and polished surfaces, each element reinforcing her perception of the intricate social performance. She noted how Emily handled the napkin folds, the pour of wine, the positioning of her plate, all small movements contributing to the narrative of control and attention. Helen absorbed these details, storing each in a mental ledger, an internal map of influence, behavior, and intention. Her posture remained poised, her hands folded lightly on her lap, her expression measured and calm, radiating dignity and restraint. Helen considered the rhythm of the gathering, how each moment built upon the last, the sequence of gestures and glances forming a silent dialogue she observed but did not engage with outwardly. Every movement of Emily, every subtle cue, was recorded, analyzed, and acknowledged silently, Helen's inner awareness a quiet testament to her agency amidst the orchestrated display. She watched as another relative reached to adjust a centerpiece, noting how Emily subtly redirected attention, guiding the flow of the morning, and Helen remained an attentive observer, the control of her own response a statement in itself. The gentle clatter of utensils and soft laughter continued, each sound noted, each gesture observed, a steady accumulation of understanding that would guide Helen's future actions. Helen's awareness encompassed the full room, every interaction, every glance, every tiny act of control or deference catalogued in precise detail, her calm exterior masking the active, deliberate processing of social dynamics that would inform her next steps in maintaining dignity and authority. She allowed herself a moment to observe her own reflection in the window pane, the sunlight catching her silver hair, the steady calm of her eyes, a visual reminder of the poise she maintained, a quiet power underscoring every measured breath and deliberate observation. Helen Parker did not speak, she did not react, she simply absorbed, catalogued, and maintained a composed presence, fully aware of every nuance, every intention, and every subtle orchestration of the morning, preparing herself mentally for the careful, strategic response that would follow. Helen Parker shifted her gaze toward the large bay windows again, the sunlight now warmer as it angled across the polished wood floor, casting gentle reflections on the crystal and silverware meticulously arranged on the table. She allowed her eyes to linger on the harbor outside, the soft waves reflecting the morning sky in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, a natural rhythm echoing the controlled precision of the gathering within. Every movement in the room registered with her, the subtle tilt of a head, the quiet exchange of smiles and glances, the careful positioning of hands and arms, as if each gesture were part of a silent choreography. Helen's attention returned to Emily Parker, who moved gracefully among the guests, subtly directing conversation and attention toward herself, offering small compliments, lightly touching a shoulder or adjusting a napkin, each act executed with meticulous timing. Helen noted how her son sat nearby, his posture relaxed on the surface, yet subtly tensed, a clear acknowledgement that he noticed the dynamics but chose to remain non-confrontational, leaving Helen to process the scene fully. She traced the rim of her water glass once again, the cool crystal a tactile anchor, and allowed her mind to catalog each nuance without judgment, simply observing the orchestration of influence that surrounded her. The distant laughter of children mingled with soft conversation, the clinking of glasses and cutlery forming a rhythm that Helen mentally aligned with the unfolding social currents. She noticed how the small, inexpensive gift still rested near her plate, its presence a reminder of the subtle inequities that had been introduced, a symbol of orchestrated oversight that she registered fully yet did not allow to disrupt her calm demeanor. Helen's eyes drifted briefly to the floral centerpieces, their arrangement precise and deliberate, enhancing the visual hierarchy of the table. And she considered how every element, from the polished silverware to the placement of the wine glasses, contributed to the nuanced social signaling present in the room. Each movement and glance around her, every interaction between Emily and the other family members, was meticulously catalogued, a mental record of behavior, intent, and subtle power dynamics. Helen observed the timing of each toast, the pauses and emphasis in speech, the way gestures were received and acknowledged, all forming a pattern that she understood completely and silently. She noted the gentle folding of napkins, the deliberate pour of wine, the small nods of approval, and the slight tilt of a head, interpreting each as part of the social architecture Emily had carefully constructed. Helen remained composed, her hands lightly folded in her lap, radiating poise and restraint, a calm presence contrasting with the subtle display orchestrated around her. She allowed herself a brief glance at her own reflection in the window pane, sunlight glinting off her silver hair, the steady calm of her eyes, and the composed set of her jaw a silent statement of self-possession. Every subtle sound, every small movement, every glimmer of expression was absorbed into Helen's awareness, a quiet ledger of social conduct that she maintained with exacting attention. She observed how the younger family members moved and interacted, their innocence highlighting the deliberate calculation in the actions of the adults, and she allowed the contrast to reinforce her understanding of the layered dynamics at play. Helen shifted slightly in her chair, adjusting her position to better observe the room while maintaining a poised exterior, ensuring that no outward reaction revealed her inner processing of events. Each gesture, glance, and tone of voice was noted, analyzed, and stored, forming a comprehensive mental map of the morning's interactions, a framework for her continued observation and eventual strategic response. Helen's breathing remained steady, her posture upright and controlled, her awareness encompassing the entire room, each interaction a data point, each subtle act a signal she catalogued silently. She absorbed the rhythm of the gathering, the orchestration of attention and influence, and maintained a quiet, composed presence, the still surface of her demeanor mirroring the careful observation and control within, preparing herself for the next steps while asserting dignity and awareness with every measured moment. Helen Parker allowed herself a subtle shift in attention, letting her gaze wander across the room without, revealing her internal analysis. She observed how the sunlight moved with the passage of time, highlighting the textures of the tablecloth, the glint of the silverware, the sparkle of crystal glasses, each detail reinforcing the sense of structure and orchestration around her. Emily Parker continued to circulate, offering comments, smiles, and light touches, drawing attention gracefully to herself while maintaining the impression of casual engagement. Helen catalogued every motion, the careful distribution of gestures and glances, the selection of words, the tone of voice, all recorded silently in her mind as a detailed map of influence and intention. She noted how other family members reacted to Emily's cues, the subtle nods, the soft laughter, the way they leaned slightly toward her, acknowledging her presence and actions, and Helen absorbed these dynamics without interruption, her calm exterior masking the meticulous attention she paid to each nuance. Helen traced her fingertip along the rim of her glass, feeling the cool surface and letting it ground her as she processed the complex web of interactions. She noticed the timing of Emily's movements, how she paused at just the right moments to ensure her presence was noted, how she guided the flow of conversation with minimal words, using posture, gestures, and slight facial expressions to achieve her effect. Helen observed her son's responses, subtle but significant, a tightening of the jaw, a brief lift of the eyebrows, a quiet acknowledgement of recognition, all of which Helen catalogued with precise awareness. The soft murmur of voices, the clink of cutlery and glasses, the gentle laughter of children, and the faint rustle of clothing all formed a background rhythm that Helen used to measure and register each interaction. She allowed a brief glance at the expensive cruise brochure resting near the larger gift box, mentally noting the deliberate choice and placement, the contrast with the small plastic gift beside her plate, and the implications of these choices within the social hierarchy of the gathering. Helen maintained a steady posture, her back straight, hands lightly folded, radiating composure while her mind processed every microexpression, every subtle adjustment of body position, every choice of words and tone. She watched a young niece approach, delivering a small bouquet with a bright smile, and Helen accepted the gesture with a soft, polite nod, internalizing the innocence and goodwill without allowing it to disrupt her controlled observation of the adult dynamics. She catalogued the gentle interactions of the children in contrast to the deliberate precision of Emily's actions, noting how the interplay of innocence and intention highlighted the subtleties of social hierarchy and influence. Helen shifted slightly, aligning herself to better observe the room without altering her composed demeanor, reinforcing her presence as a calm, dignified observer amidst the subtle orchestration around her. She noted the sequence of service, the timing of each course, the way Emily directed attention to herself during moments of shared acknowledgement, all recorded in her mental ledger as data points for understanding influence and planning measured responses. Helen traced the light pattern across the table, observing how the sun's rays highlighted specific elements, mirrored the shifting attention in the room, and reinforced the contrast between deliberate display and understated presence. She catalogued the soft sound of cutlery, the faint shifting of chairs, the small nods and smiles exchanged, each contributing to the overall orchestration of the event. Helen allowed herself to feel the quiet strength in her ability to maintain calm and composure, to remain fully aware and attentive, to observe the social dynamics with precision while appearing outwardly serene. Each movement, each glance, each subtle interaction was stored, assessed, and mentally filed, forming a comprehensive understanding of the morning's gathering, the subtleties of influence, and the measured restraint necessary to maintain dignity. Helen's awareness encompassed the entire room, every object, gesture, and sound, providing her with a complete perception of the orchestrated environment while she remained the calm, observant presence at its center. She drew a quiet satisfaction from this awareness, a steady recognition of her own poise and composure, and the knowledge that every subtle act of attention, control, and awareness strengthened her capacity to respond with measured intelligence when the moment was right. Helen Parker did not speak, did not react. She simply absorbed, observed, and catalogued, maintaining her presence with unwavering dignity, her inner strength mirrored by the composed calm of her posture and her measured, deliberate awareness of every detail in the room. Helen Parker felt the rhythm of the room shifting subtly as the breakfast plates were cleared and the server brought fresh coffee to the table. She observed Emily Parker leaning slightly forward as she directed conversation with a neighbor, her gestures controlled and precise, each movement a demonstration of social influence wrapped in casual charm. Helen's gaze followed the interplay between Emily and other family members, noting the careful timing of smiles, the subtle inflection in voice, the slight pauses that drew attention without seeming deliberate. She traced the edge of her water glass once more, the cool surface grounding her focus as she catalogued each action and reaction, silently measuring the power dynamics at play. Helen's posture remained poised, hands lightly resting on her lap, her silver hair catching the morning light from the large windows, the shine reflecting both composure and quiet vigilance. Across the table, her son engaged in conversation with Emily, his eyes flicking occasionally toward Helen, a subtle signal of awareness mixed with an unspoken choice to let the situation unfold. Helen noted the timing of gestures, the selection of words, the cadence of laughter, and the soft rustle of clothing as Emily moved to engage others, understanding the orchestration without needing confirmation or overt acknowledgement. Helen's mind catalogued the small details, the precise angle of a head, the gentle nods and tilts, the casual placement of hands on the table, the micro-expressions of each individual, all forming a comprehensive mental map of intent and influence. She observed the positioning of chairs, the distribution of space, how Emily directed attention toward herself, drawing subtle admiration and acknowledgement from the other guests, and Helen absorbed it all without reaction, maintaining an exterior of calm authority. The light through the windows shifted, highlighting the glint of crystal, the polished surface of silverware, and the vibrant colors of floral arrangements, each element adding to the visual hierarchy that Helen noted with quiet precision. Helen allowed her eyes to wander to the youngest family members, their innocence and genuine delight contrasting sharply with the careful, measured behaviors of the adults, providing her with additional perspective on the dynamics of the room. She acknowledged the gestures of the children with small, graceful nods, her expression serene and composed, internalizing the scene and registering the disparity in treatment without outward display of discomfort or frustration. Helen traced the pattern of conversation, how attention flowed from one person to another, noting the subtle interruptions, the timing of interjections, the slight shifts of posture, each moment carefully logged in her awareness. She observed how Emily guided interactions, the minimal but deliberate adjustments, the strategic smiles, and the choice of topics, all reinforcing control while appearing natural. Helen's calm exterior allowed her to process the subtle maneuvers without revealing her understanding, maintaining dignity and poise, an unspoken assertion of composure that contrasted with the orchestrated display around her. The gentle hum of voices, the occasional clink of glasses, and the soft rustling of napkins formed a background cadence that Helen integrated into her observation, noting timing, tone, and intention. Helen felt the quiet power in restraint, in silent observation, the ability to remain fully aware while appearing serene, each movement around her catalogued with clarity and precision. She allowed herself a measured breath, her chest rising and falling evenly, her fingers resting lightly on the table, the sunlight glinting across the polished surfaces, reinforcing her awareness and measured control. Every glance, every slight movement, every microexpression was absorbed, catalogued, and analyzed in Helen's mind, forming a detailed internal record of influence, intention, and subtle social dynamics. She noted the interplay between her son, Emily, and the other guests, recognizing the layers of intent, the subtle hierarchy, the social orchestration at play, and committed to observing with patience and clarity, the control of her reaction a statement in itself. Helen Parker did not speak. She did not act overtly. She simply observed with precision and maintained a poised exterior, every detail entering her mental ledger, each observation reinforcing her understanding, her dignity, and her quiet, unwavering presence amidst the carefully constructed environment. Helen Parker shifted slightly in her chair, the subtle movement bringing a soft creak from the polished wood floor beneath her, a reminder of her physical presence amidst the orchestrated flow of the morning. She observed Emily Parker directing attention toward a cousin, leaning slightly as she spoke, her voice light and engaging, every movement deliberate, drawing smiles and nods from those around her. Helen traced the path of sunlight as it traveled across the table, glinting off the crystal glasses and polished silverware, and in that light she saw the contrast between the carefully curated attention Emily received and the quiet dignity Helen maintained. She sipped from her water glass, feeling the cool surface steady her focus, cataloging the minute shifts in posture, the micro-expressions, the subtle inflections in tone, the pauses that punctuated conversation, all forming a complete map of social dynamics that she absorbed with precise awareness. Helen's gaze lingered on the children, their laughter pure, unencumbered by awareness of adult intentions, and she allowed their innocence to highlight the deliberate orchestration surrounding her. Her son glanced briefly at her, the soft lift of his eyebrows acknowledging her presence and awareness without comment, and Helen registered the silent communication with careful precision. She noted how Emily positioned herself, the tilt of her head, the gentle hand gestures, the way her words flowed seamlessly to direct conversation, and Helen catalogued each action as part of an intentional, controlled display. The small gift beside her plate remained untouched, a tangible reminder of inequity, yet Helen did not react outwardly, maintaining a calm, composed exterior that contrasted with the subtle hierarchy orchestrated around her. She observed the flow of conversation, how each family member responded, the slight adjustments of bodies, the timing of smiles and nods, and stored these observations silently, creating a mental ledger of influence and intent. Helen traced the gentle movement of sunlight across the tablecloth, the reflection on polished surfaces, the glint of crystal catching her attention, and she compared these natural patterns to the choreography of human interaction, recognizing the parallels in control and precision. Each gesture, each glance, each shift in posture was logged meticulously in her mind, a comprehensive understanding of the interactions and hierarchy forming with every passing moment. Helen allowed herself a slow, steady breath, the inhale and exhale measured, a reminder of her control over both her inner state and her external composure. She observed Emily redirecting attention subtly, a nod here, a tilt there, and noted how the timing of these actions guided the room's focus with minimal effort. Helen traced the contours of the floral arrangements, the polished silverware, the precise placement of glasses, and interpreted each as part of a larger visual narrative designed to reinforce social positioning, cataloging the effect without a word or gesture. She remained a calm, observant presence, each movement around her carefully processed, every nuance recorded, each interaction forming part of the broader understanding of influence and intention that Helen maintained throughout the morning. Helen acknowledged the gestures of young relatives with polite nods, keeping her interactions minimal but graceful, allowing her calm authority to contrast with the deliberate display orchestrated by Emily. She noted the subtle tension in the room, the quiet undercurrents of influence and attention, and used them to guide her observation, understanding fully the orchestration without being drawn into overt participation. Helen Parker remained poised, composed, her hands lightly resting on her lap, her posture straight and dignified, eyes alert to every detail, every expression, every gesture, cataloging them in a detailed internal ledger while maintaining a serene, unbroken exterior. The gentle rhythm of conversation, the soft clinking of glassware, and the movement of sunlight across the room all became part of Helen's awareness, reinforcing her steady observation and quiet presence. Every nuance of Emily's behavior, each pause, tilt, gesture, and smile, was stored in Helen's mind, creating a comprehensive understanding of the controlled social dynamics, while Helen herself remained a calm, dignified observer, fully aware, fully present, and entirely composed throughout the unfolding morning. Helen Parker felt the soft hum of conversation settling into a quieter rhythm as the breakfast service drew to a close, the plates cleared and replaced with small coffee cups and delicate saucers. She observed Emily Parker moving gracefully among the remaining guests, her gestures measured, the tilt of her head, the curve of her smile, all orchestrated to draw attention subtly while maintaining an air of casual engagement. Helen's eyes followed every movement, cataloging each inflection, each microexpression, the timing of interactions, and the slight adjustments of posture, storing these details in her mind as a mental map of social dynamics and influence. The sunlight streamed across the polished wood floor, glinting off crystal and silver, creating patterns that mirrored the careful, precise control Emily exerted over her surroundings. Helen traced the rim of her coffee cup with her fingertip, the cool surface grounding her focus as she mentally reviewed the flow of the morning, noting how Emily had guided attention, redirected conversation, and subtly emphasized her own presence. She observed her son's quiet acknowledgement, the slight lifting of his eyebrows, the brief glance that indicated recognition of the situation without intervention, and Helen recorded this as another data point in her understanding of the household dynamics. Helen's gaze wandered to the younger family members, their innocent chatter and laughter providing a stark contrast to the deliberate orchestration of the adults, highlighting the calculated precision of Emily's actions and the subtle hierarchy present in the room. Helen adjusted her posture, sitting straighter, her hands folded lightly on her lap, radiating composed dignity as she continued to observe, noting how each small movement, raising a cup, leaning slightly forward, a tilt of the head, contributed to the social architecture surrounding her. The faint clinking of cutlery, the soft rustle of napkins, the measured cadence of voices all formed a rhythm that Helen synchronized with her observations, tracking the flow of influence and attention in real time. She noted how Emily managed interactions with effortless control, offering small gestures, carefully timed smiles, and brief words to guide the energy of the room while appearing natural and unassuming. Helen acknowledged the small bouquet brought forward by a young niece with a soft nod, internalizing the gesture of innocence without allowing it to shift the balance of her internal composure or the awareness she maintained over the subtle displays around her. Each glance, each movement, each minor adjustment of body or tone was carefully logged, forming a detailed mental record of influence, intent, and the orchestration of attention. Helen observed the changing light patterns as the morning progressed, how the sunlight glinted off glass, silver, and floral arrangements, and used these visual cues to mark the passage of time and the subtle evolution of social dynamics. She noticed how Emily's actions were calculated to highlight her presence, the sequencing of attention, the timing of gestures and pauses, all executed with precision to create the intended impression. Helen's awareness encompassed the entire space, every object, every interaction, every faint shift in tone or posture, forming a comprehensive understanding of the room and the roles of those present. She maintained a steady, calm exterior, her breathing even and controlled, her posture poised, her mind actively recording and analyzing, each detail serving as a piece in the larger mosaic of observation and awareness. Helen felt the quiet power of her restraint, the ability to observe fully, understand fully, and maintain dignity without overt response, every measured breath reinforcing her composure and clarity. The soft murmurs, the gentle laughter, the movement of chairs, the slight shifting of bodies, all became part of Helen's detailed mental ledger, catalogued with precision, each contributing to her full comprehension of the social landscape. Helen Parker did not speak. She did not act outwardly. She remained a calm, attentive presence, every glance, gesture, and sound absorbed and understood, her poise and awareness a quiet testament to her observation, composure, and quiet authority throughout the morning as she prepared silently for the careful, measured actions she would take when the time was right. Helen Parker took a slow, deliberate breath as the last traces of breakfast were cleared from the table, the soft clinking of china and glass fading into a quiet hum that filled the dining room. She allowed herself a brief moment to glance around, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the faint smiles exchanged, the gentle tilts of heads, the measured glances that flowed across the room like a quiet current of acknowledgement and calculation. Emily Parker continued to engage with her husband and other relatives, her gestures precise, the light inflection in her voice carrying both warmth and subtle authority, commanding attention while appearing effortless. Helen's eyes tracked every movement, every microexpression, each nuanced interaction catalogued in her mind, forming a detailed mental map of intent, influence, and social hierarchy. She noted how attention flowed, how Emily guided conversation with gentle inflections, strategic pauses, and subtle gestures, drawing focus without overt force. Helen observed her son's occasional acknowledgement, the soft lift of his eyebrows, the slight curve of his lips, signaling awareness without interference, a tacit understanding that Helen absorbed fully. The sunlight through the bay windows shifted as the morning progressed, reflecting off the polished surfaces and the crystal glassware, highlighting contrasts and drawing attention to subtle details Helen noted and stored. She traced her fingertip along the edge of her coffee cup, feeling the cool ceramic steady her focus, as her mind continued to process the intricacies of the social interplay. Helen allowed herself to observe the younger relatives, their laughter pure and unguarded, providing a counterpoint to the precise and deliberate actions of the adults, emphasizing the contrast between innocence and orchestration. She acknowledged their gestures with small, graceful nods, maintaining her composed exterior while internalizing the scene, aware of each signal, each nuance, each silent communication. Every movement of Emily, every tilt of the head, every gesture of hand or smile was catalogued, understood, and stored silently in Helen's mind, reinforcing her awareness and strategic patience. Helen noted the rhythm of conversation, the cadence of laughter, the soft shifts of bodies and chairs, the timing of glances and nods, all forming a detailed ledger of the morning's social choreography. She observed the subtle interplay of light, reflection, and shadow across the room, using these visual cues to gauge timing, focus, and the flow of attention. Helen allowed herself a gentle exhale, feeling the quiet power in restraint, in observation, in maintaining dignity without overt engagement, every measured breath reinforcing composure and clarity. She tracked the positioning of gifts, the placement of decorative items, the subtle contrasts in attention and acknowledgement, recognizing each as part of a deliberate design to establish hierarchy and influence, and stored this understanding without reaction. Helen's gaze drifted to the harbor beyond the windows, the gentle waves reflecting sunlight in shifting patterns, a visual parallel to the currents of conversation and attention in the room. She observed how Emily's movements guided the energy of the gathering, how each smile, nod, and gesture influenced focus and perception, cataloging it all with quiet precision. Helen remained seated, her hands lightly resting on her lap, posture upright and poised, her mind actively noting, analyzing, and internalizing every detail, each interaction, each subtle act of influence, building a comprehensive understanding of the environment. She recognized the orchestrated nature of the morning, the deliberate flow of attention, the strategic placement of gestures, and allowed the awareness to deepen, a quiet assertion of knowledge and control. Every glance, every microexpression, every soft laugh and gentle movement was absorbed and processed, forming a detailed map of relationships, intentions, and influence. Helen Parker did not speak. She did not act. She remained a calm, vigilant presence, her poise unbroken, every detail recorded and understood, preparing silently for the deliberate and measured response she would take in the moments to follow, her dignity intact and her awareness complete.